Hi, and welcome to another episode of Law Now. Let us continue on our journey through the historical milestones that have shaped Indian constitutional law. I have discussed in the first part of this series on the history of the Indian constitutional law how the British East India Company got the grant of Diwani. Now, with the grant of Diwani, a momentous shift occurred, elevating the company to the position of the true master of Bengal, Bihar, and Odisha. It bestowed upon them the responsibility of tax collection. However, assuming such immense powers in such vast territories was no simple task, and the company wisely chose not to take control of it immediately. So, the administration of civil justice and revenue collection was left to the hands of Indians. But the company did hire two English officers to oversee this system, and as we'll see, this arrangement proved to be a grave misfortune for the country. The Indian officials who were responsible for governance lacked the necessary authority to enforce their decisions, while the company's servants, who were the de facto rulers, were unburdened by any sense of accountability. Their allegiance lay solely with the Court of Directors in England, rendering the plight of the Indian masses inconsequential. Governors were appointed from the ranks of the senior company servants, and beneath them a hierarchy of civil and military officers governed the land. These officers, who earned very little money, took advantage of their positions without facing any consequences. They accumulated personal wealth by accepting gift, bribes, and extorting money from the impoverished Indian people. They were like Robin Hood, but in reverse. You see, my friends, the company had got great power, but had no responsibility. And as we have seen, with great power comes great exploitation of the masses, if there is no accountability. They stole Indian wealth left, right, and center, cleverly calling it trade and sending it back to England. By this time, the suffering endured by the people of India reached unbearable levels, culminating in a devastating famine in Bengal and Bihar from the year 1769 to 1770, which affected more than 30 million people. Surprisingly, during this same period, the company had gone bankrupt and was seeking a loan from the crown, and this puzzled the British people, as the company's servants themselves were getting richer day by day. So, suspicions arose, and the members of the British Parliament drew attention to the sad state of the company's administration. Thus, on the 13th of April 1772, a secret committee was established by the House of Commons to investigate into the affairs of the company. The committee's finding unveiled a multitude of defects and deficiencies in the company's administration, prompting the recommendation that parliamentary regulation should be instituted. And as a result, the Regulating Act of 1773 was passed, asserting Parliament's authority to govern the affairs of the East India Company for the first time. This was no ordinary legislation. It was a transformative leap towards establishing a definite system of governance in India. The Regulating Act of 1773 achieved four objectives that left a lasting impact on Indian history. Firstly, it changed the company's internal structure. Previously, the company had been overseen by a court of directors, comprising of 24 members, who were elected annually, a system which was susceptible to manipulation due to its brief tenure and reliance on the shareholders for re-election. And the Act rectified this by increasing the tenure of the directors to 4 years and restricting voting rights to shareholders holding at least £1,000 worth of shares. Furthermore, directors were now obliged to submit all correspondence from the Governor General in India to a designated Secretary of State, thereby strengthening the British government's control over the company. Secondly, the Act established the recognition of the government in Calcutta, unifying the previously separate and independent presidencies under one authority a governor general and 4 councillors were appointed to govern the presidency of Fort William in Bengal, consolidating civil and military power. The Governor General of Bengal held the authority to suspend any governor or their council, solidifying their position as the supreme authority in India. This marked the initial step towards centralizing the administrative machinery in India. Thirdly, the Act established a Supreme Court in Calcutta, led by a Chief Justice and 3 other judges who were appointed directly by the Crown. This court possessed jurisdiction over civil, criminal, admiralty, and ecclesiastical matters, with its reach extending to all British subjects residing in Bengal and Orissa. The court was empowered to hear complaints against any subjects of His Majesty for crimes, misdemeanors, or oppressions, as well as to adjudicate suits, actions, and complaints against any individual. Although the judges of the Supreme Court, the Governor General, and councillors were exempt from arrest or imprisonment in any court proceedings. What a clever way to evade justice. Appeals from the Supreme Court could be directed to the King in Council in England, and the court operated through trial by jury. Lastly, the Act extended the Governor General's control to encompass the presidencies of Bombay and Madras, although to a limited extent. It also granted legislative power to the Governor General and Council to establish rules, ordinances, and regulations for the proper governance of the company's settlement at Fort William and its subordinate factories. However, this legislative power was still subject to certain conditions, which were that the laws had to align with the English laws, they had to maintain reasonableness, and they had to be registered and published in the Supreme Court. So in a way, the Supreme Court held authority over the legislative powers, and the King in Council could set them aside based on applications from individuals in India or England. Thus, the Regulating Act of 1773 marked a pivotal juncture in India's constitutional journey, effecting significant changes that has been reverberated throughout the nation's governance for generations to come. While the Act had good objectives, the devil, as always, was in the details. Firstly, the Act failed to clearly define the boundaries of the Governor General's powers in relation to his council and the Supreme Court. Secondly, the Act left the Supreme Court in a state of legal limbo. It neglected to specify which law the Supreme Court was supposed to administer. One can only imagine the frustration of the judges trying to make sense of the legal maze they found themselves in. Lastly, the Act placed the Governor General at the mercy of his council. This vulnerability compromised the Governor General's authority and autonomy, impeding effective governance and fostering an environment prone to political and personal agendas. Because of these flaws, the Parliament had to come up with a new Act that would settle these issues once and for all. Thank you for watching, my friends. I hope you got to learn something new. Please subscribe to my channel and let me help you boost your legal IQ. This is Ayan, and I'll see you in the next video.